fell in love with him at first.
Now, describe your observations of Amber and Mr. Depp's relationship in the early stages.
Again, at first, that was wonderful. They were incredibly in love. I actually, to this day, have never seen my sister fall so madly for somebody. And things were wonderful. They seemed to really understand each other and get along well. But very quickly, this pattern emerged as their relationship went on, that if Johnny was using, there almost always was a fight. There was always a
Objection, Your Honor. Cause for speculation, lack of foundation.
All right. As a foundation, if you want to lay foundation.
What, if any, changes in their relationship did you observe?
That when Johnny was using, there would be a fight. I saw it firsthand.
Objection, Your Honor. Same objection.
Overruled, that's fine.
Thank you. Please continue.
If he was using or if he was drinking, there was almost always a fight. There was always an argument. There was always a period where they weren't getting along, and it seemed to oscillate pretty quickly. He would be sober for a little bit and then almost just as quickly fall off the wagon and start to use or drink, and there would be some big blowout, and it seemed to go back and forth pretty frequently. There was never an extended period of time where it was one or the other.
What, if any, changes did you observe in Amber over the period of her relationship with Johnny?
At first, Amber was Amber. She was loud, fun, funny. She laughed a lot. She was just this happy, bright, fun-loving thing, always surrounded by friends. And then it was a progression that took over such a long period of time, and it was so slow. In hindsight, it was like watching a slow-motion gunshot. She suddenly stopped sleeping as much. She wasn't as funny. She wasn't as loud. She wasn't as gregarious as she used to be. Cut to the end of their relationship, she was so physically unwell. She maybe weighed 100 pounds soaking wet. She was emaciated. She wasn't sleeping. She had developed a heart condition, and her eyes were sunken in. She just looked
Objection,
like
Your
two
Honor.
different...
Lack of foundation calls for hearsay.
She's giving her observations.
Well, heart condition, I'll sustain as to heart condition.
Okay,
Thank you.
other than the heart condition, please continue.
She just, if you were to do a photograph side by side, you would see two very different people. And people that knew her throughout the entirety of their relationship saw the same thing.
What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp exhibiting controlling behavior over the course of their relationship relating to Amber's clothing?
Objection, Your Honor. Leading.
What, if any, observations did she
Sustain
make
the
about?
I'll sustain the objection.
What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp's treatment of Amber relating to clothing?
At first, it would be like light jokes, or, she left the house wearing something like, oh, you're going to wear that, or just some joke. It was very subtle, And then over time, again, just like the progression of their relationship, it just intensified. Then suddenly it's, they have the same stylist. He and I forgot her name, but suddenly they have the same stylist, and he had been essentially controlling what she wore to events and things like that. So she went from being able to wear whatever the hell she wanted, and then suddenly she's wearing anything that his stylist wanted her to wear, or wanted him to wear. And her style over time just got more and more conservative.
What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp with respect to Amber's work?
That too was one thing. At first, he was saying he was protective over the kinds of jobs she was taking. Oh, that's not going to be good for her career. That's not going to be good for this, not going to be good for that. And then suddenly he has a problem with her taking any sort of job or any sort of audition. And then it became every time that she even thought about taking a meeting, it was another fight. He would often say things like, I don't even understand why she needs to work. I'll take care of her. I'll take care of you. I'll take care of everyone else. She doesn't need to work at all. It was one of those things that he was at the end, vehemently against her working at all.
What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp's treatment of Amber with respect to friends?
Again, these are all things that just very slowly over time just changed. At first, he was very inclusive of all of us. At one point, we all lived downtown together in these beautiful lofts. At first that was part of the relationship, was getting to know him and him getting to know us. And then just, again, slowly over time, he took issue with Brandon at one point, and then Brandon wasn't allowed in the fold. Time went on, he had an issue with Io. Io wasn't allowed in the fold anymore. And then at some point, even me, he had accused me of doing something horrendous that I had never done. And then suddenly, I'm not allowed around anymore. And just over time, she had such a small network of people that were there to support her. It was hard to watch.
What, if any, observations did you make about Mr. Depp's attitude or treatment of Amber with respect to her health?
Amber was she was a pretty healthy person at first. She didn't have any medical issues that didn't need intervention of any sort. But in one of Johnny's attempts to get sober, he had employed Dr. Kipper, who had these nurses, and he had a personal nurse that would administer medication, and I think the intention was to make sure that he stayed clean and
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation.
Without discussing what the
Sustain the objection.
intentions were, just go ahead and give us what your observations were with respect to Mr. Depp, with respect to Amber's health.
Sure. All of a sudden, for really unclear reasons, Amber had her own personal nurse just administering medication, and from what I saw, it was strange. I didn't think Amber needed, medication on the daily or whatever. And then all of a sudden, she has a therapist that is employed by Dr. Kipper. Even her medical treatment was somehow controlled by or paid for by Johnny.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for speculation with respect to the control.
Was to control, but paid for. I'll allow. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. What, if anything, did Mr. Depp say about Amber's electronic devices?
Well, every time they fought or had an argument, a device was going to get smashed. She lost a phone, a tablet, a computer. You could almost guarantee that something would get destroyed when they fought. Very often, fights were at least in part surrounded by text messages or something that he would find on her phones or whatever. And at some point, she wasn't even allowed to have passwords on her phone. Or if she did have a password, it was something really simple that he memorized. But there was zero expectation of privacy for her in terms of what was on her device or accessibility of her devices.
How many times did you observe Mr. Depp drunk?
Countless. Too many times for me to quantify.
How many times did you observe Mr. Depp high on drugs?
Again, it would be really hard to put a number to that. It was a lot.
And what types of drugs did Mr. Depp use, to your knowledge and your observation?
Well, I've done cocaine and drank with him on a number of occasions, so that. He almost always had weed of some sort, marijuana, joints or whatever. I have seen him take MDMA on an occasion, shrooms as well. I once saw him consume a Ziploc bag that had a bunch of just unknown pills, some prescription, some not. He just took them all at once to see what would happen, and he laughed about it. Those are what I can recall.
Okay. Now, you said that you also did cocaine with Mr. Depp, is that correct?
Yes.
What, if any, observations did you make as to what Mr. Depp carried in his pockets?
Well, he always had cigarettes or rolling papers. When I say cigarettes, I mean the tobacco and rolling papers. He always had a joint on him. If he was in a phase of using coke, he would carry around a little pill box that had his cocaine in it. he always had a pocket knife, a lighter, and yeah, it's about what I can recall.
Okay. What, if any, behavior changes did you observe when Mr. Depp had been drinking alcohol or using drugs?
Like I said, it was, a completely different version. He was almost unrecognizable when he was drinking and using to an excess. If it was alcohol and Coke, he would slur. He would go on these paranoid, delusional rants about things that didn't make any sense. His speech would be slurred. I almost never knew him to use cocaine without drinking. Those were generally combined. When he would smoke weed, he was much more relaxed. He was kind of what you would expect, happy on a couch, laughing. But when he was drinking, he would just get very angry, and he would just say really nasty, unkind things, and it almost didn't, usually about Amber, sometimes about me, but it almost didn't matter if she was in the room or not. He would just say really horrible, horrible, horrible things about her or to her.
Can you give the jury a few examples that you can recall?
Pardon my language, fucking cunt. He called her a fucking used up trash bag, slimy whore, saggy whore. Fucking cunt was thrown out a bunch. Just horrible things like that.
I'm going to take you to March 21st, 2013. We've called it the painting or Keith Richards incident. When did you arrive at the Orange apartment on March 21st, 2013?
It was sometime in the afternoon. I came in, and Orange was typically a very neat, clean place, but as soon as I walked in, there was smoke in the air. Remember, it smelled like cigarette smoke, and there was smoke in the air. So somebody had been smoking inside, which was odd because Amber and I don't smoke, and Johnny used to always just go outside to smoke. But walking a little bit further in, there was like furniture askew. Going into the kitchen, there was, Johnny was sat at our little breakfast nook table that we had there, and he was wearing glasses. He had, there was cocaine in front of him. There was booze in front of him, journal, like no newspaper, things like that, just kind of scattered around at the table. And I sat down to talk to him to see what was going on. And it was really hard to understand what he was getting at. It was really clear that he had been drinking for some time. His speech was slurred, and again, it was really hard to follow what he was trying to tell me. At first, he seemed to be upset that my sister had been photographed with our friend Marie in France. He then started saying that it must have meant that she was having an affair with her, and everyone would be laughing at her. And this woman, her father was a French politician, so he then starts rambling on about, he knows what her father's up to, and her this, that, and the other. And again, it was just this strange paranoid tailspin is the only way I can describe it. It wasn't true. My sister wasn't having an affair with this person.
Objection, Your Honor. I think it's pretty non-responsive at this point.
All right, next question. Sustain the objection.
Please describe what your conversations were and your observations were with Mr. Depp.
So as I'm sitting there talking to him, Amber is in the kitchen, and she's not sat at the table or anything. She's kind of hanging back, and Johnny's still talking to me about what the problem was. And then all of a sudden the focus shifts to this painting that has been on the wall ever since Amber and I moved in. And the painting was done by one of my sister's exes. So he was convinced that it was on the wall to taunt him, to tease him, and how disrespectful that he had to wake up next to this painting. And it surely meant that Amber and Tasha were back together again, which of course was not true. But he was then upset about that. He was upset about this painting that was on the wall. I was trying to talk to him, not only to just try to figure out what was going on, but I was trying to get him out of the house because he was already very late for filming this documentary that was being shot at one of his houses.
Was that with Keith Richards?
Correct.
Okay.
That was my understanding of it.
Please continue.
So for hours we sat there. I was trying to, talk to him, make him feel like everything was okay, just try to get him out of the house. His assistant kept coming in and out at one point. And all the while, Amber is just in the kitchen. She's like giving us space, but she's in earshot, and he's saying these things about her. And at one point, she tries to come over to like check on him, and she kind of braces him from behind, and he's just like, fuck off, and, continues to say these things about her. And again, we sat there forever, and eventually we did get him to leave the house. So, but he insisted that Amber come too, and that if they were going to work it out, she'd have to be there, and they would talk about it at some other point, I guess.
Let me just stop you for a minute. What, if any, injuries did you observe on Amber at that time?
At the time, it was before I had a real understanding of what was going on. It was pretty, I didn't know, frankly. And her face was swollen, but I didn't, and it was kind of red. I thought she had just been crying. And her lip did appear to be cut, but again, that at the time, that wasn't what we were trying to do. It wouldn't have been appropriate to, talk to her about it or anything. That wasn't my focus, frankly. My focus was just sitting there trying to figure out what he was upset about and get him out of the house.
So how long were you at Orange with Mr. Depp and Amber before he left to go to the Keith Richards?
A few hours. I couldn't say, maybe around like 4 or 5 hours.
Okay.
It took a minute.
Now, did you accompany Mr. Depp over to the recording, or did you stay?
I did.
And did Amber go too?
Correct. That was part of the condition of him leaving, is that Amber had to go with us.
All right. Well, please describe to the jury what happened next then on your ride over there.
So Amber and Johnny were sitting in the back. I was in the front with Sterling, the driver, and they weren't saying much back there. There was music playing pretty loudly, so I couldn't really hear what was going on back there. But at some point I heard the back door open, or the back window open, and Johnny is holding our dog out the window. And I froze. I was scared because I just remember thinking, I knew how inebriated he was, and the dog was very small. I thought if she twitched or, if he lost her somehow, she was just going to go out the window. And Amber, of course, was just saying,
Objection, Your Honor.
Not often to prove the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor.
I'll sustain the objection. Next.
Okay. Don't say what Amber said. Just go ahead and continue with your observations.
He brought the dog back into the car, and he was just laughing, this really scary, loud, like it was almost like a cackle. And he then made some joke about putting her in the microwave. And that was the joke after that, was putting the dog in the microwave.
Okay. So during the year 2013, what, if any, marks did you observe on Amber? Any injuries or signs of markings, anything like that?
Occasionally I'd see bruising, cut lips, split lips, weird marks, burns, or I don't know, on her arm, scratches on her arm, things like that. It was just weird, and it was periodic. It wasn't like a constant thing, but there were injuries to her.
And what, if anything, did you do? Did you ask her about them?
I did at some point confront her and ask her, and she...
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Don't tell us.
Sustain the objection.
Okay.
Next question.
Okay. But you did ask her about them?
Yes.
Is that-
Objection,
okay.
Your Honor. Same objection.
Next question.
That's fine.
That's okay.
Overruled.
Thank you, Your Honor. All right, I'm going to take you to June 2013, Hicksville. Were you in attendance at that event with Mr. Depp and Amber?
Yes.
Please describe for the jury what you can recall from that event.
So Hicksville is like this, it's this like collection of themed Airstreams. It's like a little, it's in the middle of the desert. It's just like a fun little place to go. So we went with a group of our friends. And yeah, so each one of us had our own little Airstream or whatever. So my partner and I at the time, we got there last. So as we're going around checking out the different Airstreams, because again, each one of them had a different theme, so it was kind of fun to see, you know, who was staying in which theme or whatever. I open Amber and Johnny's, and there's cocaine on the table. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. I was just like, all right, fine, we're all here to have fun. And that night, you know, we sat around the campfire, everyone was drinking, some people were taking shrooms, you know, and then I drank too much and I went to bed early before everyone else. And then the next day, you know, when everyone was cleaning up, I had heard about something that had happened the night before, and an altercation that...
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Don't tell us what you heard. Go ahead and just tell the jury what you observed.
I observed people cleaning up after what appeared to be just a night of friends hanging out. I then went to my sister's trailer, where she was staying with Johnny, and it looked like a bomb went off in there. There was broken things, things had been skewed. It just looked incredibly messy. It looked like somebody had ransacked it. That's what I observed.
Okay. Now I'm going to take you to September 2013. What, if anything, did you do with Mr.